What's up, guys? Episode 2 of the Swing It podcast coming at you live. Um, so, yeah, episode 1 I think went pretty well. So, I'm back for episode 2, baby. You know, maybe we'll have more. We're definitely going to have more. Spoiler alert, there's going to be more. So, today, the first thing I wanted to talk about was something that has been bothering me for a while, but then recently with the NBA awards happening, like it happened during the NBA awards, kind of got me to the point where I want to actually talk about it. And that is the notion that James Harden doesn't show up in the playoffs. Granted, I don't know. He can do better in the playoffs. I feel like he hasn't got to that point. He hasn't had his signature moment like in the clutch, right, where people can kind of point to and be like, hey, James Harden, like he's here, like he's arrived, right? But the Rockets games are kind of weird though, because of the way that they're set up, and it's just their style of play. So the games, the margin of victory or loss is very, very big. It's a big margin. They either win by a decent amount or they lose by a decent amount. They rarely have these like close back and forth games where there are opportunities for clutch play, because they are just a highly volatile offense with just jacking up threes. And when they're on, they're on. But when they're not, it's a struggle for them to kind of get that energy and that offensive flow back. So that's why I'll kind of touch on this later in the show about how they can change that to be more successful. But in this case, I'm just talking about how James Harden quote unquote doesn't show up in the playoffs. So if you look at his stats, I pulled his stats from his playoff career with the Rockets, because that's what everybody judges him on anyway, right? Not really with the Thunder, because he was like the third option behind Russ and KD, and he didn't have the prominent role that he has now. So points per game with his career with the Rockets is at a 28.2 points per game, which is an insane number. Last season, this most recent season, he averaged 31.6 points per game. And this is the thing that people are going to make jokes about and say that he doesn't show up in the playoffs, granted, but he's averaging 31.6 points per game in this playoffs. Kobe averaged over 30. It was like 30.6 or 30.8 for his playoffs, but people, I mean, it all comes down to did they win the championship, which I don't think is a fair assessment of someone's ability and they're showing up or not. And I'll kind of touch on that in a minute. Assists per game, his career with the Rockets is at a 7, just 7 flat. Last season, it kind of dropped off a little bit to a 6.6, but he did average more points, so it was kind of a give and take thing there. Steals, 1.8 for his career, 2.2 in this most recent season. Field goal percentage is a little low. It's at 41.2%, and last season was 41.3, so it was pretty much on point there. Free throw attempts, 9.4, and last season was 8.9. Now, these are all solid numbers. Outside of his field goal percentage is a little bit low, but considering the types of shots he takes with those step back threes, just off the dribble is a really good field goal percentage. And another thing that people say about him is that he gets, he's not effective in the playoffs because all he does is try to draw fouls, right? But like he does, I'm not saying that he doesn't. He does exaggerate contact. He does, fall down on threes too many times, in my opinion. But he also averages the most drives to the basket per game in the league. So with that being said, he should therefore be shooting more free throws than everyone else, right? You would think. He was the league leader in drives per game in the playoffs at 23.5 drives per game. The next highest was, I think it was Donovan Mitchell at 21 drives per game. And, Giannis is at 14.1, just for reference. So he drives to the game, or drives to the basket almost 10 more times per game than Giannis does. And in the regular season, he actually drives 19.6 times per game, drives to the basket. So he actually drives to the basket more in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. So therefore, he should be getting more free throws, you would think, in the playoffs. Granted, he's not going to because they call it tighter. But, it just goes to show people want to, talk about how he gets more free throws than everyone else, but he's also driving more than everyone else. So, if other people drove as much as he did, maybe they would get more, foul shots. So I did pull up some other stats from different players. So with Kobe, his playoff stats, 25.6 points per game to James Harden's 28.2 career averages. Assists per game, 4.7 to James Harden's 7. Steals per game, 1.4 to James Harden's 1.8. Field goal percentage, 44.8 to James Harden's 41.2. Free throw attempts, 7.4 to James Harden's 9.4. So, I don't think there's anybody on this planet who could say with a straight face that, Kobe doesn't show up for the playoffs, right? But looking at these stats, James Harden's numbers, for the most part, just looking at it with just these numbers strictly, James Harden does show up for the playoffs. Same thing, I pulled Dwayne Wade, 22.6 points per game to James Harden's 28. Assists per game, 4.9, James Harden's 7. Steals, 1.6 to 1.8 for Harden. 47% field goal percentage, which is amazing, to James Harden's 41. And 7 free throws to James Harden's 9.4. So another great player who everybody can agree on that shows up for the playoffs, whose numbers don't measure up for the most part to James Harden's numbers. And I know a lot of people are going to see this or listen to this and say, well, dude, stats don't tell the whole story, man. And I am aware. I know that stats aren't the whole story. But these are the same people who also will use stats to justify people's greatness. They're going to, bash whoever they want. If they want to bash LeBron, it'd be like, 3-6 in the finals, man. You can't argue with that. Apparently it's better to miss the finals than to actually make it and lose. So if he only had those 3 championships, but has never been to any finals outside of that, apparently that would be better for some people than just not making it at all. So I don't know. I don't know what people's arguments are. The media drives all these narratives with the way social media is nowadays. I'm going to sound like, an 86-year-old man, but it's true. That's just the way it is now. You have these shows like First Take, Undisputed, that are rising in popularity. Maybe, I don't know why they are, but they are. You have people like, Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, Skip Bayless, who have these outlandish opinions that are literally just there to stir up controversy and to get clicks, get retweets. And you see it, like Max Kellerman at the end when Andre Iguodala hit that shot. He went on that rant and said, if I had to bet on anyone to make a last-second shot, I'm taking Andre Iguodala. And he knew that saying that would get all these, clicks and retweets, and people quote tweeting him saying he's an idiot. He doesn't care. It's literally what he's there for, is to have these outlandish opinions. Same thing with Skip Bayless, and he was the perfect, replacement for him, because he is now just the counterpart to Stephen A. Smith, and they just their job is to literally have differing opinions to drive whatever narrative they want to drive at that particular time. And not to bash them, I mean that's their job. They're doing their job, but everybody falls for it, and everybody has their opinions just pre-made for them, just from whatever ESPN's talking about. And people don't actually form their own opinions anymore. And that's not just for sports, that's just in general. People have just other people's opinions thrown in their face all the time on Twitter or Facebook, and then that's what people absorb and just spew out back as their opinion because that's what they saw. But anyways, that's kind of going off on a tangent, but back to the whole thing around people's greatness nowadays is measured in basketball, at least, and other sports also, is how many championships do you have? How many times have you led a team to get that ring, right? That's why LeBron was held to that standard for so long. That's why he wanted to get that ring so badly, so he can kind of get that monkey off his back, because that's what people were talking about all the time. Is he's great, he has all these accomplishments, he has all these MVPs, but where are his championships, right? And that now they're doing something similar with that to James Harden. Saying he doesn't show up in the playoffs, he can't get past the Warriors, all this stuff. And you have people like Karl Malone, John Stockton, Charles Barkley, who are obviously great players. They're legends. John Stockton's the leading assist man of all time. But you wouldn't say that they're not great because they don't have rings. Like they ran into MJ's Bulls, right? He was the one, and they were the ones that stopped them from getting over that hump. You have Charles Barkley, same thing. They had a bunch of great teams back then. And you have people nowadays where you had Kobe and Shaq that people had to go through in the West, and then they kind of passed the torch after they kind of split up to Popovich's Spurs with Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker, and they kind of reigned for a little bit. You have, LeBron ran into them when he was on the Cavs in 2007, and then LeBron went to the Heat, and they were the force that stopped people from getting over that hump. Now you have the Warriors. It's just a constant cycle of great players that can't get to that next level because there's already other great teams who stop them from getting there, right? But I just think that it's wrong, it's unfair, and it's irresponsible to judge an individual player's greatness by using a team accomplishment as the measurement for that greatness. Now you can add on to it saying like, this person is great, they led so-and-so to a championship, awesome. But, a player individually can only do so much with what they're given. If you look at all the great teams, you got Kobe and Shaq had Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan had Phil Jackson, a great system, a great coach, a great front office that put good players around them. I think a good coach, is overlooked a lot when people talk about great teams. Obviously everybody's focused on the players, but if you don't have a good system and a good coach around you, then it's just not going to work. I don't even know, you can't really name a great team who's won a championship that has not had a great coach behind them. I don't know, that's like a separate issue, but that's just something I think gets overlooked a lot. So yeah, great players are going to lead their teams to championships. A championship team is always going to consist of one or two, really, really great players that lead them to that championship and lead them over that hump. But not all great players will be able to get there. There's not enough time. There's not enough games, there's not enough seasons to allow every great player who deserves a ring. I mean, Steve Nash, for example, was a player that was extremely consistent for a long time who just never got there. Granted, I'm really happy that he got a ring finally with the Warriors as a one of their trainers, but yeah, so that's the end of that rant. I just wanted to kind of touch on that to kind of put that James Harden doesn't show up to the playoffs to bed, and that was just annoying me for a while. Back on to some normal stuff. So the Lakers were in a bit of a cap space jam. Thank you. Came up with that all by myself. I tweeted it. If you want to go ahead and just follow me on Twitter at SwingItPod. It's also in the corner there. There you go. Or Instagram at SwingItPodcast. Make sure you follow me. Okay. Lots of good stuff. Yeah, cap space jam. So LeBron traded his jersey number 23, and cash considerations for Anthony Davis to waive his $4 million trade bonus that any other situation would have, just accepted the $4 million. Be like, yeah, man, that's $4 million's $4 million. I'm taking that. But him doing that will allow the Lakers to possibly sign another max player. Now, if you remember from last episode, I said, hey, I don't think you should get another max player. You should get really solid role players, 3-and-D guys who can just fill in around LeBron and Anthony Davis and that will be enough to lead them to a championship. Already talked about this, but I feel like if I don't kind of reiterate my mindset, then it won't really make sense. But signing another max player, say they get like Kemba Walker, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, somebody like that, where you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, and you'll end up possibly, it's like a high risk, high reward type of thing, where they could all stay healthy and you'll have a great season, you win a championship. Or somebody gets hurt and then you're shot, you have no depth because you spent all your money on your max player and you're out of luck. So in my opinion, they should use that money to sign a couple more solid role players, some maybe like a Patrick Beverley that I talked about last time, Seth Curry, someone like that to fill in those roles that they need, instead of another max player that could possibly just get hurt and be a sinkhole for them. Kemba Walker, oh man, I feel so bad for this guy. He's been mistreated at Charlotte for so long. I talked about this last time too, but he was offered way below the max. I think they were offering him, I forget what it was, like 160, something like that. It was way below the max that he could have gotten. Granted, he did say that he would accept less than the max, but I think that's one of those things where he was saying it because it's like the politically correct thing to say. Is like, oh, of course I'll sign for less than I deserve because I want to build a championship team here. But I think they offered him even less than he was thinking they would. So he was like, nope, I'm out. See you later. So with him gone, granted, I don't like nothing's official yet. Obviously, Sunday is when the free agency starts. But where does he go if he's leaving Charlotte? If Kyrie leaves the Celtics, which it's looking like he will, either Brooklyn or that's the main one people are saying. If not there, then maybe the Lakers want to sign him. Not even gonna get back into that. But I think the Celtics would be a good spot for Kemba. They have a young team around there. He can be that veteran presence to, maybe get them to the next level with, Jason Tatum kind of taking the reins with Kemba Walker. So that would be a solid landing spot for him. Lakers would be someone else who have the cap room to sign him now. But I still think Kemba will be their backup plan. Kawhi is still the guy they're really gunning towards for the most part. And I think if they were going to sign another max player, Kawhi would definitely be the one to get. But if not, then Kemba will be their backup plan. Jimmy Butler, there's a few, but I think the Celtics would be the best landing spot for Kemba if Kyrie leaves, which it's looking like he will. In other news, which is disappointing news, there's rumors going around the Rockets are offering PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, and Eric Gordon in different packages to attempt to get Jimmy Butler. This is it would definitely be a mistake for the Rockets, in my opinion. They made this mistake last season when they let Ariza and Mbah Moute go, who were they were solid shooters, but more importantly, they were really good defenders, and that's something that the Rockets have always struggled with. Is they have a really potent offense, but they're not great defensively. You can score all you want, but if you can't stop the other team from scoring, then what's the point? And this brings me to my next point. You already have Chris Paul and James Harden, who are ball dominant guards who need the ball in their hand to make stuff happen in their current play style, right? And Jimmy Butler is another one of those players who works best when he has the ball. And I know whenever Chris Paul went to the Rockets, everybody's like, oh, there's only one ball, you can't really make it work. But they were able to make it work with Chris Paul and Harden. But if you add Jimmy Butler into the mix, another ball dominant guard / forward, it's just going to add problems, especially with a third, ego to that mix in the locker room. It's just not. It just wouldn't be a good fit, in my opinion. And I am not a fan of them getting rid of any of those three. Capella is a great defender. PJ Tucker is their best on-ball defender, best hustle man. Since they don't have Patrick Beverley anymore, PJ Tucker kind of stepped up and filled that role. And then Eric Gordon has been great since we got him. He's kind of found, had a kind of a renaissance with the Rockets, and he's great for us whenever James Harden and Chris Paul aren't on the floor. He kind of carries the offense. So I think we need to keep all three of them if possible, and our offense needs to change. I know somebody talked about this, I don't know who it was, but the style of offense that the Rockets are playing with just give James Harden the ball, everybody else stand around the perimeter and wait for him to make a play or pass it to you, it just isn't working. It's not going to work to get to that championship level. Now, is that James Harden's fault? No, I wouldn't say so. I think it's more of a D'Antoni style offense. And granted, I think D'Antoni's a good coach, but that offensive scheme isn't going to win the Rockets any championships. He had a similar offense with the Suns with Steve Nash and Stoudemire, and they could never get over the hump. So I just think they need to change it up, have more of a motion offense, because you're not the thing people don't realize, because you can't see it happening, is if you watch the Warriors offense, you see them moving the ball so quickly and getting a defense to move around and really work on defense. And it's really tiring to slide and constantly guess what the defense is doing. That's why, when I played, I loved it when teams would just come down the court. One person would just hold the ball, or they would just jack up a three immediately, because I didn't have to do any work as a defender. I didn't have to follow anybody around. I didn't have to chase people off screens. anything. So it was a dream come true when I just saw somebody come down the court and just jack up a three. That's less work for me. I just have to get the rebound now. So that's especially in the playoffs when teams are just turn everything up to the next level. Intensity is way higher. You're not making teams work on defense and tiring them out to where they're not as effective on offense. So that's why you see the Warriors when they run their motion offenses. I'm just using them as an example. Like a lot of teams do it, but it's just polar opposite from what the Rockets do. You just see James Harden. He makes one defender work. The rest of them just it's like an extra timeout essentially for the players who aren't guarding James Harden, because you just have to sit there and just watch your player, make sure he doesn't get open for three. That's basically what it is. So I just think the Rockets need to switch things up. Not necessarily personnel wise. I think the personnel they have can work in a different style offense, but they just need to figure that out and actually, switch it up and have a more motion style offense. Granted, that's easier said than done. I could just sit here and be like, "Oh, just run plays, man," But that what you're doing isn't working, obviously. So change it. Hey, that's it. That's it for this episode. A little bit shorter than last time, but it is what it is. Not a lot of stuff to talk about this week, but Sunday we'll start a slew of things once free agency starts going down with people signing and moving. A lot of moving parts starting Sunday, so I'm pretty excited for next week's episode. I'm going to have a lot more to talk about. So thank you guys for listening or watching. I appreciate it. Like I said earlier, make sure you guys are following me on social media. Got the Twitter and Instagram down there at the bottom. Swing It Pod on Twitter and Swing It Podcast on Instagram. If you guys follow me on there, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week.